Chapter 10 is the record of many conversations between Charles and Adam over the course of, it seems like, 3 to 4 years. I've noticed something about the character of Charles, and that is Charles has an undue preoccupation with the past, with things that have happened. Now, the book is called East of Eden, a historical biblical allusion. Chapter 1 talked about how Steinbeck remembers growing up in the Salinas Valley, but there's a real danger for those who forget what happened underneath our feet, the different geological features of forest, rock, and sea that we stand upon when we're in Northern California, if we forget what's happened beneath our feet, and the different groups of people, the natives, the Spaniards, the Americans, and there's a real danger in forgetting. Then later we met a character named Cyrus, Charles and Adam's father, and one of his keys to at least career success was that he was a historian and he was an expert in what had gone before, and that made him valuable as a military general. Well, Steinbeck wanting us to remember and to go back into the past to more properly understand our present, that seems different than what Charles does. Charles seems preoccupied with the past. Just in this chapter, I could think of 5 things that he brings up. So interestingly, one time early in the morning, Adam asked what seems to be a rhetorical question to his brother Charles, and he says, "Don't you ever forget?" And that seems like I could point out 5 things that Charles seems consumed with the past. Number 1, he is still obsessed with the amount of his dad's money, the amount of the inheritance. Number 2, twice in the chapter, he tells Adam to just skip ahead to the part in the relationship where Adam runs away. And in order to say that, Charles is drawing from the past. He knows what's going to happen. There'll be a time of sharing stories, catching up. Then there'll be a time of silence and avoidance, each of them doing their own thing. And then eventually they're going to get on each other's nerves. Then Charles is going to be mean. Then Adam is going to run away. Well, the only way Charles could know that is if he was someone who lived in the past, someone who studied the past. So he's obsessed with the inheritance money, not so much the money, but how his dad got it and how his time frames don't match up. He wasn't really at the battles. Therefore, there's no way that this money is legitimate. And number 2, his previous encounters with his brother Adam and how those always go poorly, and they always go poorly in the same way. What he's against in this chapter, he's super annoyed by Adam bringing up how California is this promised land, how California is this precious, how California is an idol, how no one in California suffers at all, that it's really just the return to the Garden of Eden. So Charles is against any sort of forward-looking, westward-looking, future planning, anything that someone would describe as hope. Charles is against. So travel, learning new cultures, going new things. Charles goes exactly one place, and that is to remember his father in Washington, D.C., and Adam goes everywhere and thinks of where his future, where his hope lies, and Charles is anti any of that and settling instead for same geographical location and looking backwards. So besides his dad's money, his past relationship with Adam, and being anti-travel, anti-California, anti-hope, when Adam is telling Charles about his previous sexual and romantic relationship with a Native American woman, Charles immediately says, "Our father would roll over in his grave if he knew you were squawing around." And so his immediate thought is what his dad would think about Adam's behavior. And then fifthly, he brings up a teacher who came to town that made him want to get married. And so it just seems Charles is preoccupied with the past. And so that is a thing to think about in his character. Another thing I noticed is over in the second page of the chapter, they're both waking up at 4:30 because Charles is waking them up. Speaking of Charles, at 4:30 in the morning, his eyes were open and had blinked once before the high gong struck. For a moment he lay still, looking up into the darkness and scratching his stomach. Then he reached to the table beside his bed, and his hand fell exactly on the block of sulfur matches lying there. His fingers pulled a match free and struck it on the side of the block. The sulfur burned its little blue bead before the wood caught. Charles lighted the candle beside the bed. Then a little bit later, just a little bit later in their morning routine, the fire isn't stoked properly. And so rather than lighting a second, third, an additional match, Charles uses his breath to blow on the fire to stoke it. And that annoys Adam. And it says, Adam was watching him through the door. You wouldn't use a match, he said. Charles turned angrily. You mind your own goddamn business. Stop picking at me. And I knew that was an allusion to earlier in the book, and I tracked it down earlier. And so way back in chapter 3, when Charles has beat Adam almost to death, Adam is laying there in the dark, in the ditch, in the water. And it says this back in chapter 3. Consciousness came back, quick and frightening to Adam. His mind rolled in a painful mist. His body was heavy and thick with hurt. But almost instantly he forgot his hurts. He heard quick footsteps on the road. The instinctive fear and fierceness of a rat came over him. He pushed himself up on his knees and dragged himself off the road to the ditch that kept it drained. There was a foot of water in the ditch, and the tall grass grew up from its sides. Adam crawled quietly into the water, being careful not to make a splash. The footsteps came close, slowed, moved on a little bit, came back. From his hiding place, Adam could see only a darkness in the dark. And then a sulfur match was struck and burned a tiny blue until the wood caught, lighting his brother's face grotesquely from below. Charles raised the match and peered around, and Adam could see the hatchet in his right hand. When the match went out, the night was blacker than before. Charles moved slowly on and struck another match, and on and struck another. He searched the road for signs. At last he gave up. His right hand rose, and he threw the hatchet far off into the field. He walked rapidly away toward the pinched lights of the village. So, whether Adam is making this connection or Steinbeck wants us readers to make this connection, there's some connection with the sulfur matches. So whether Adam is annoyed at how Charles will use multiple sulfur matches to murder him, but he won't use multiple sulfur matches because he's going to presumably, I guess, waste the money or the resources. And so anyway, there's this callback by Steinbeck and perhaps by Adam to the time when Charles was attempting to murder Adam, and he wanted to find him using those sulfur matches, and all it did was illumine for Adam the grotesque nature of Charles's face. Then another thing I noticed that's an allusion not to earlier in the book, but perhaps to the Bible. In the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, there is a well-known parable, the parable of the good, not the Good Samaritan, the parable of the prodigal son. And in the parable of the prodigal son, there are two brothers and a father, and the father has an inheritance for the two brothers that causes the division between the two brothers and also causes division between the father and one of the brothers. And so in that parable, the prodigal son wants to cash in while his father is still alive and go ahead and take his money, and he runs off. And so the prodigal son runs off while the self-righteous Pharisee son stays home. And so it being Jesus, a Jew, telling the parable to Jews, one of the grotesque things about this made-up story is that the prodigal son, of course, wastes the money, his father's inheritance, and he runs away, and he goes from feeding pigs to living with pigs. So a ceremonially unclean, to the Jewish sensibilities, a grotesque animal. So this this fall is a far, far fall. He goes from living in the house of a father who loves and who has resources to being off on his own. And so the point of the parable, half of the point of the parable of Jesus is the waste and the grotesque sex, drugs, and rock and roll life of the prodigal. And when Charles and Adam are arguing at the end of the first section of chapter 10, Adam got up. "I'd rather live in a pigsty," he said, and he walked out of the house. So perhaps an allusion to that prodigal son parable, in that there's a inheritance debate, and there's a debate between the two brothers and the self-righteous Pharisee brother and the father. So perhaps there's an allusion there. So there's the allusion to the match earlier in the book. The allusion, maybe I'm just making it up, just something I came up with the prodigal son, maybe may or not be. And then there's an allusion to Cyrus, their father. So toward the end of the chapter, where Charles has confronted Adam about never paying him back that $100, they're sitting at the table, and it says, "Adam looked down at the old table where Cyrus had sat, knocking on his wooden leg with a stick, and the old oil lamp was hanging over the center of the table, shedding its unstable yellow light from the round Rochester wick." So I don't know what to make of that, other than Steinbeck by no means references sitting at Cyrus's table for nothing. And I don't know what to make of it, but it just seems significant that he's literally hovering over this conversation about money between the two boys, and they're sitting literally in the shadow, maybe, and the light is casting shadows. When he says it's an unstable yellow light, well, that makes me think if the light is unstable, then the two boys are still living in the shadow of their father.